Thank you for joining us today for the Smart Designs for Data Collection with Adaptive Clinical Trials webinar. My name is Natalie Zappis. I'm the Partnership Manager at Medrio and will be moderating today's webinar. All lines will be muted for the duration of the presentation, but feel free to send questions via the WebEx Q&A feature on your screen throughout the course of the webinar. Please make sure to send questions to all panelists if you choose to do so. Our presenters today are from PharPoint Research. We have Jayme Swinson, Senior Director of Programming, and Jim Nance, Manager of Programming Technologies, on the line with us. To get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about PharPoint, a full-service contract research organization headquartered in North Carolina with offices in Durham and Wilmington. They specialize in project management, clinical monitoring, data management, and biostatistics. PharPoint experience in phase 1 through 4 clinical research projects across a variety of therapeutic areas, including infectious disease, oncology, CNS, cardiovascular, and rare disease indications. If you aren't already familiar with Medrio, we are an integrated e-clinical software platform with a fully hosted electronic data capture system for all study phases. Our software features an easy-to-use drag-and-drop interface, allowing study managers to build their studies in days instead of months without any programming knowledge. We also have a new mobile suite called mSource that supports both event-based and subject-based workflows, offline data entry, and patient-reported outcomes. PharPoint is a Medrio user for about 7 years now and has been a member of Medrio's partner program since its inception in 2013. I'll now hand it over to Jayme to further introduce today's topic.
And welcome everyone to our WebEx. Again, this is Jayme Swinson. I'm the Senior Director of Programming here at PharPoint, and co-presenting me today and joining me is my colleague Jim Nance. And what we're going to be talking about is smart designs for data collection with adaptive clinical trials. We've broken today's topic into 2 sections. The first section, we're going to talk about using Medrio form rules to control the dynamics needed for an adaptive design. The second section, we're going to be talking about designing forms with SDTM compliance and data analysis. For today, first we want to use prompting questions and form rules to meet an adaptive design. Secondly, we want to go over ways that we adhere to C- guidance and needs of data collectors as well as data consumers. And then lastly, we want to show some ideas for form designs so that collection on multiple forms can be integrated into the appropriate SDTM domains or data sets. Adaptive design. What is an adaptive clinical trial? In basic level, a trial design that uses observed data to modify the clinical trial without jeopardizing the integrity or validity of the ongoing trial. Some of adaptive designs, adaptive dose escalation or de-escalation, early stopping of the trial for toxicities or efficacy or futility issues, adding new treatment arms is an adaptive design, size re-estimation, and lastly is an evaluation-guided treatment allocation, and this is the one that we actually want to talk about today, and that's what we want to present in our demonstration. A picture of a study design overview. This is a nice flow chart of the design of study that we have come up with this demonstration today. As you see, when you come into the study, and when you go through your screening, just like typical, you will have your informed consents and your demographics, but then you're into the inclusion-exclusion criteria forms. If you meet criteria, you can move into the studies, into the visits, but if you don't, you're immediately kicked to the end of the study, to the study forms. One study, guiding you through visits 1 and 2, you can see that we have the treatment is capsules at 50 milligrams and vital signs being taken at pre-dose and 15-minute post-dose. Through visits 1 and 2 and entering visit 3 with evaluation form, and this is the evaluation guided piece of the adaptive design. You can see, depending on the evaluation, you can continue on in visits 4 and 5 at the top, study ABC, status ABC arm, and maintain the same dosing allocation and vital sign in the visits of 4 and 5. How, based on the evaluation, you get into the adaptive part of this design, which would enter into visits 4 and 5 with a modified dosing of IV. We decided to modify the vital sign collections and add an additional visit as part of the demonstration for today in this adaptive design. So for today's topic, we want to show you ways that we use Medrio's tools, and specifically speaking the form rules, to control those dynamics that we just showed you and talked about, the evaluation guided treatment allocation. And for the, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to kind of show us how he's able to do this.
Hi, everyone. So for the first part, as we do our study, we're at screening. As far as the color codes go, things that are gray are not active in the study at the time. Items that are in green are the items that are being added, and items in yellow are things that play into the triggers for adding the items that are green. So first thing I want to do is make sure that we end up with our end of study form in place. It leads on attributes, one being a send date being present. Also, there being an answer specified for inclusion-exclusion criteria for whether satisfied all or not. And then also, as part of the inclusion-exclusion, we wanted that they have a status of AD confirmed before proceeding into the study. However, this is for the study form. In both a screen fail and a non-screen fail situation, which is why we're keying on the idea of not missing for this, as opposed to stick answers of yes for meeting inclusion-exclusion criteria. So we'll take a quick look here in Medrio last subject. And subject, we have our 3 present. So I'll put in some info real quick. And we can, even though technically demographics not on for completeness, we'll just pop in real quick. To our inclusion-exclusion form. So we'll just say argument that no, they didn't meet criteria. It was some criteria, and they did not meet their evaluation status. That triggered the add for our end of study here. Now, say you had a situation where that subject, for example, would not screen fail, where we would expect them to then proceed into our Visit 1 and Visit 2 sections. Essentially, it's same criteria. The answer is just a little bit different. So we'll go back to inclusion-exclusion criteria and just update for that notation. So here's a subject where they did meet their inclusion-exclusion criteria, and before proceeding into the study, we had an actual confirmation of the status of ABC. Yes, we're now proceeding into the study as Visit 2 with dosing and vital signs designed for 50 milligram capsule. Quick, the form for that. So here, form rule, form can say non-missing. Expected values of yes for inclusion-exclusion met in the evaluation status of ABC screening, and then here are additional Visit 1 and Visit 2 special capsule and vital sign forms being added. getting to the point of hitting our true evaluation for where the design will start. And before we want to have the evaluation, we want to make sure we have confirmed dosing for our protocol at visit 1 and 2. So we're going to be having confirmed dosing as in non-missing values for dosing, date, and time at each visit 1 and visit 2. So we'll put that in there real quick. Visit dosing, visit 2. And we've now triggered, as qualifying, we can now get our evaluation visit. So now at our evaluation visit, it's time we make our evaluation, and that would be a status of ABC, XZ, or potentially another status, in which case they would not continue on in the study and proceed straight to end of study, which they've already received. So in the case where their status ABC, we'll continue on visits 4 and 5 to continue on with 50 milligram capsule dosing, which includes 2-point collection of pre-dose as well as 15-minute post-dose. And we're continuing on that way. However, out that actually that evaluation of that subject was a test of X, Y, and Z. So now switch gears and introduce instead not a visit 4 or 5 capsule procedure, but a 4 or 6 switch to a dosing IV procedure, which necessitates a different design and dosing form as well as a different design in our vitals form, because the protocol-defined capture points for IV dosing. And we can see that for vitals, additional time points involved. Instead of just a pre-dose and a 15, we've got a pre-5, 10, and 15. We'll say it's actually a status of XZ. Yes, now switch gears. We're on 4, 5, 6 IV and pulse sign.
So to the second section of the work for today, we wanted to talk a little bit about designing these forms with SDTM compliance and data analysis in mind. So the main issue that we have is trying to meet the needs of both data acquisition as well as data analysis. This is my little visual of how we're going to do that. So for data acquisition, the goal is the data captured in a way that eases data collection and cleaning. For us, is the data captured in a way that's for analysis, and we have to take these concepts, these different needs and different ideas and wants from the two communities, and we've got to find the right balance within these communities. So let's look at some of these goals and realize how some goals are, but yet the difference between the needs between the two user groups, whether it's the group for data collection or the group for data analysis. So for the goal for data collection is to collect, store, and ensure the quality and integrity of the data that's being collected. Whereas for the analysis group, we want to receive that data. We want to receive the complete high-quality data that's most conducive to the review process. So here we see pretty good similarity between the two. One, provide the complete high-quality data from the data collection group. For the data analysis group, we want to receive complete high-quality data. The difference of the needs between the groups. From the collection perspective, can we ease some of the burden for data entry? And what I mean by that is, can we be flexible while also reducing the errors? For ease of entry, can we come up with an intuitive design that will guide the data collection end users through the study from a data collection perspective? and can increase the collection efficiency? Can we collect data more seamlessly and more efficiently? From a perspective, can make sure to the ability to link data that needs to be linked together and to meet analysis plan. And we also ensure that the data is of quality, but also consistent. We want to ensure the consistency, whether it's unit consistency, units of measurement, consistencies across panels. We'll make sure that it is quality data while maintaining consistency. Missing or questionable data. The data analysis group would like to enforce that all data is required, no missing data. We know this. However, that does not meet with reality. So therefore, we've got to be able to handle missing data, but we do want to minimize missing data. Please conform output meeting the expected standards. And today's standards, following CDIS models like SDTM and ADAM, can we basically build our forms in such a way that will be geared towards meeting those standards? So the tug of war that goes between these two user groups. So we have our data collection users, our CRAs and coordinators, our data managers, a little bit of a war with the SDTM and ADAM standard as well as the analysis in the TFLs. So how do we better reduce some of this war that's going on between the two and where CDASH comes in? We've actually designed some specifications based off of the CDASH user guide, and what we want to do is take our vital signs form that Jim's built out and how he actually went and followed some of these guidance that come off the user's guide so they adhere to CDASH and SDTM as we're building out these forms. I just want to hand it back over to Jim to kind of walk through the demonstration of how he met these needs.
Okay, so just real quickly here, just run over a few of the differences between the perspectives of what happens at collection versus what happens downstream of that at data standardization. So, for example, it says that for you would want to have a prompt for if we're collected or not, and you want a definitive answer. You want data entry of yes or data entry of a no, and that's captured through via perf. We want to ever rely on missing data to make an assumption that perhaps something was not done. You want a confirmed yes or you want a confirmed no. That is similar, but not exactly what ends up happening slightly downstream of that in SDTM. SDTM, it actually is a slightly different idea. It's essentially just the no aspect of that. Those decisions that the people are in charge of deciding the best SDTM have made. So even though VS-Perf exists at a CDASH level and is more conducive to collection, what is VS-Stat on the mapped SDTM side because that is more conducive to analysis and or ends up being technically derived field based on VS-Perf. Both those lines, it's just kind of the nature of the difference between the needs of collection versus the needs of analysis. So it's not an issue. For example, VS reason D for the reason not done. That's a straight no need to manipulate. Look at dates and times. There's another perfect example to where there are inherent differences in needs during the collection phase and the analysis phase. So, for example, during the collection phase, they're typically done as separate fields because if you had an instance where, for example, in our vitals, we have multiple time points being collected within a given calendar day, you would not want to force a site to repeatedly enter the date not needed. It's also prone to error. But from an SDTM point of view, that ends up being as an integrated date time field that conforms to a specific standard, ISO 8601. ISO 8601 makes perfect sense when you look at it, but it is not normally the type of date representation that people are used to. For example, whether you're a day, month, year person or a month, day, year person. So the way it can be collected in the style that is most conducive to collection for correctness that get mapped on the back end to conform to the expected regulatory standards. Through, and then we get straight over to the meat of it, which is the actual test, the result, and the unit. And there are kind of a variety of approaches for that. Dash provides multiple suggestions for how someone might approach this problem. There are advantages and disadvantages to these approaches. So here's an example of a vertical, more normalized approach. It's only C-dash suggestion, but it is one of them. And nothing wrong with it, it's just taking this approach causes certain other potential complications. So here's an example. We're collecting data, essentially a record per test. That's fine, but it introduces a few issues. One of those being, what are we to do with our result? So what are some of these issues? Now trouble enforcing numeric precision. And end up, because we can't enforce numeric precision, we have an inability to correctly perform range checks, and we're kind of stuck as either having to handle text or numeric. The reason why is because we have, with the structure, we have a single result. So in this example, we would kind of have difficulty because it would be wonderful to be able to set this field as numeric, which is great. We can do that. All our tests are numeric. However, if we set it as numeric, we'd also like to be able to set it to enforce integer only, because for our first 4 tests, blood pressure, pulse, and respiratory rate, that is collected. Unfortunately, because it's a single field collected vertically, that would put us in a bind for temperature and weight, which, for argument's sake, tends to be collected normally to 1 decimal. We flip with that problem if we turn around and have our results set to not be restricted to integer and instead allow 1 decimal precision, because now we've opened the door for users to potentially inadvertently enter in data for our first 4 tests with front precision, which does not make sense for those tests. So that's one of those complications that kind of shows up. It ended up with that situation because we can't enforce numeric precision. We're now also in a bind for any kind of range checks we want to do. We obviously cannot have valid range checks unless we know we've got restricted data that conforms to an expected standard. The problems that happen from this structure is units. Well, we can take a couple of different approaches for our units and trying to solve those problems. With edit checks, skip check, or attempt to pre-append the test names on. They actually had 1 name. So here's a couple of examples. In blue, I've got an approach, and in green, I have another approach. The blue approach would be using logic. You can see grayed out units that would not be applicable for each given test. That it precludes the user from picking a unit that's not applicable for that test. That's fine, it works great. However, this is a little on the awkward side. It's a little ugly. It might be a little confusing to data entry. It works, maybe just not the most graceful solution around. Now, this green approach, which would be, well, let's follow that and we'll just put all our units in a single drop down. Then we end up with a problem, because by trying to solve that, we've unfortunately created another problem. So we'll show real quick. If we have a situation where we approach, then technically we end up with people able to do things like I'm doing here, which we obviously don't want people to be allowed to do. We can try and shore that up, of course, with edit checks. We can perform edit checks that would tell them if they picked an inappropriate unit for a given test. The problem is, of course, that allowed them to enter the unit in the first place, and would have been much nicer to have preclude that from ever happening in the first place, rather than allowing them to make the mistake and then tripping a query on them. Those are our problems. Some of them. Here's our approach. Instead of going with a vertical structure, we've gone more with a horizontal structure. That has distinct advantages. So, now force numeric precision. What we have is with individual fields captured for the different tests. That means that now we can truly restrict our first 4 to integer only. And we therefore also can have correct and accurate range checks applied, because now we know the level of numeric precision is enforced. We're still able to enforce precision on temperature and weight to 1 decimal, and we still have the ability to have directed units for temperature as well as weight. The side benefit of all this is having a structure like this now allows us to combine skip logic to very clearly show the sites at entry, for example here, that weight is only collected at pre-dose and not at any of the preceding time points. So we need to enforce numeric precision, we get good range checks, and because we have specific fields, we can handle either text or numeric only results, because each test is its own. It does not have to switch to a lowest common denominator approach involving the other tests. We also are forcing the correctness of the units for those tests and handled through design itself. We aren't shoring it up with checks that slap their hand after the fact, or skip logic to auto-gray out non-applicable results. Just review back our study design. So we got a study to where they transition into visit 1 and 2 capsule dosing, at which point time of visit 3 an evaluation is performed, where it's either ABC or XYZ, potentially, assuming they're not a fail, is determined. Then they proceed on in the study as either continuing the capsule or switching to IV. Because there are inherent differences in what's going on with the capsule dosing as well as with the IV dosing, we also have differences when it comes to the collection of vital signs. And that means that we end up with 2 different kinds of exposure forms and 2 different kinds of vital signs forms, which are noted as EX1 for capsule, VS1 for vital signs, EX2 for V, and EX2 for vital signs for IV. This is a picture of the exported data as a SAS data set for VS1. We remember is our capsule dosing, which only had our 2 time points, which you can hear pre-dose in 15 minutes. Going real quick back and forth, here's our 2. Same, however, this is for the IV and more time points. Here between the 2, you'll notice that the very difference in the naming convention is VS1 has 1s, VS has 2s. Now, technically, according to C-, we should be making just VS, but because of the needs of the study, we can't do that. We've got to have different forms. So we want to stay as true as possible to the intent of C-, but yet still need to meet the criteria and need of this study. So we're going to make our 1s be 1s and our 2s be 2s, but yet keep everything else as close as possible, such that at the end, on the SCM mapping on the back end, when we transform the data, it's as smooth a transition as is possible into the SDTM structure, which is similar but different. So there's a top and a bottom half to this. This shows our VS2 the bottom half is the SDTM. So the coding shows for example, we can see that green for visit was a straight pass-through. The idea of time point in pink is a straight pass-through. Some things, though, get changed a little bit. So an example would be the date and time. So here, from a collection point of view, we have the date being collected in a way that is makes more sense to the data entry. It's in the date format that they expect it to be in for their country of origin, and should hopefully be comfortable with that, and therefore have correct data be entered in. Because this is happening on a single calendar day, we only collect date one time, but we can, of course, collect time multiple times. So in SDTM, we can see that while these have come together into a single field, that field conforms to the ISO 8601 standard. You can also see that the data that is captured primarily horizontally ends up being transformed as SDTM needs it to be, which is much more of a vertical structure. You can see units over here, our red results end up over here, and our purple test concepts end up being transposed here.
Thank you, Jim. So let's just recap a little bit of our discussion that we had there. That's a lot of material that's been thrown at everyone. So just so going back through some of these, we've gone over ways to use form rules to meet a type of adaptive design. I think Medrio has power in the form rules and skip logics, and with that, it allows us to meet some of the adaptive designs that we run across on a day-to-day basis. We cover ways to balance the needs of our data collectors and our data consumers and their needs and their wish list. We've gone over ways to build forms so that data can be easily set together and analyzed and so conform to SDTM standards as the industry is expecting to do these days. So do we have any questions? Have we been receiving questions from our Q&A panel? If you have any questions, if you could please submit those questions using the Q&A and direct them to all panelists. I think I've got a question here, and I'll just kind of go over for this one. I'll take it myself. This is a question that's come up that is, at what point in the drug development process standards need to be considered? I'm assuming what we mean by this, the standards as being the SDTM or C- standards. My question would be, in the ideal world, we would take into account these standards at the protocol development phase. If you were to, if you go to the CDISC website, you would find they actually have a model that we could follow. This is the Protocol Representation Model, or PRM. Ideal place, an ideal time in which you would implement standards, or at least take these into consideration. We all know that in reality, that's usually the case. We actually get more data collection before we consider standards, and that's fine as well. CDISC helps with that. It's why it's written as loosely as it is. So you can take that, but also you have to have a really foundational knowledge of SDTM and the end results that you're trying to meet. And then lastly, if you get past the data collection, let's just say that you've had several early studies in the product development life cycle that are adhered to the CDISC standards. A couple later phase studies that do adhere to CDISC standards, you can always use outside of systems such as SAS and MAP studies in a way so that you can actually standardize all your data together right before you're gearing up for submissions, following the guidance that you would need to for an NDA submission. That's I know we've kind of gone past our 30-minute allotment of time. I don't know if we want to continue with answering questions, or if we want to try to take one more and then we field the rest of the questions and respond back after the webinar offline.
Yeah, we could maybe do one more and then we'll follow up offline.
Okay. So I'll take this one. So the question is, why can't I have had both vital sign data sets have the same names? So do they have to be ones and twos? Okay. So nice to have kept everything as a single form. But because of the adaptive design, there's overlap. So there's the adaptive design when it kicks over into visits 4 and 5, even though visit 6 only applies on the status XYZ IV branch, 4 and 5 technically overlap and apply on both the ABC or XYZ branch. What that means is that you may have form rules set up in Medrio to where only one branch would logically be able to be active at any one point in time. You still cannot have fields be this exact same name if there is technically the potential for them to occur at the same visit. Now, of course, set up your form rules to preclude that, hopefully if you set them up correctly. But as a safety measure, basically Medrio won't allow you to potentially have colliding fields that would collide because they're the same name. So seeing that we have to have different forms, we will go ahead and use slightly different name variations, but we want to use variations in the name that make good sense. As it would be nice to keep them. If everything be the same name, then we could stick more to the C-dash guidance of naming convention, but because the needs of the study, specifically in this example situation, we can't adhere to that, so we want to stay at least, if we adhere to it perfectly, then we want to stay as close to it as possible and definitely stay true to the intent and spirit of the C-dash standardization guidance.
All right, anything else?
Thank you, me and Jim, for that great presentation and for your detailed replies. I'd like to reiterate that if any of your questions went unanswered, we'll follow up via email to address them. The webinar recording will be available early next week. If you'd like a copy, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at nzaffis@medrio.com. Thank you much, everyone, for joining today's webinar, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you.